so far removed from the idea of America and its minarchism written in the United States Constitution, where we have to bring her back to where she belongs. Thank you for listening to this episode of Chasing Life, Liberty, and Minarchy. Of the world, I welcome you to this latest episode of the Chasing Life, Liberty, Minarchy. I was about to say the wrong show. You know how I do, because we get fancy, free, and footloose out here in these streets. I'm thrilled to have you guys here with me on this journey again, right? As we talk about getting to a minimalist state. This series titled The Path to Minarchy. We either do it through incrementalism or revolution. The last episode, we spent about 45 minutes to an hour, right? Walking the path of incrementalism and what that looked like, right? We also explored real world examples of how slow and patient reform from tax caps to school choice can chip away at the state's power. But we ended on a sobering note, didn't we? The ratchet effect, that powerful force that ensures government grows in a crisis but never shrinks back, right? AKA 16th Amendment, right? Well, we don't need the money for the war. We'll take it out. Government got greedy, didn't they? Mm-hmm. We know they did. But it left us at a pretty profound question. Is incrementalism just a fool's errand? A way to rearrange the deck of chairs on the sinking ship? Right? The incrementalist Sisyphus, we talked about him briefly, right? Last episode is about constantly pushing the boulder of liberty up the hill, only to watch it roll back down, right? We talked about that theory, so I'm not going to spend 20 minutes going back through that again, right? Today, we look at the other path, right? The path to the right, the path to the blue side of the graphic that you see there, right? The revolutionary's path. Now, when I say revolution, I'm not talking about violent uprisings or storming of the Bastille, right? I'm talking about something far more profound, more in the line of a paradigm shift, right? A fundamental, irreversible change in how society operates that renders the old systems not just obsolete, but irrelevant. This is the argument that you can't fix a fundamentally flawed system from within. You have to build a new one so much better that the old one simply withers away. This is what I call the Revolutionaries' Manifesto. Before we get completely started, make sure, as I take my sip of coffee, make sure you guys have already done the like and subscribe thing. Make sure you have the ability to share it. Do that too. You can find it. You can view us on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, Torture Liberty Media Foundation. Same thing on YouTube. If you're part of the locals community, you can go over to our locals page, TOLMF M at .locals.com. Obviously, you're here on Rumble if you're seeing me. And if you're over on Twitch, we over there too, Torture Liberty Media Foundation. And we're on Kick. That's Torture Liberty Media Foundation. And we're on the airways wide open, WRMI out of Okeechobee, Florida. So make sure you got your clickers on and your thinking caps on, because we're about to become radical revolutionaries just for this episode. The core philosophical argument, okay, for a revolutionary path is that the state, as a monopoly on violence and power, is fundamentally unreformable. And I think a lot of us will agree with that statement, right? Because when you have a political system that controls the state and those two political machines are controlled by other corporations, right? This is how you get the private prisons. This is how we get these things. The carceral system all screwed up, right? This is how we get this, right? So I think we can agree to a point, right? That statement that the state has a monopoly, the state has a monopoly on violence and power is fundamentally unreformable because they'll never let go of that power, right? The state in this regard is an entity with a natural institutional impulse to expand its influence and control over, right, laws, right? From this perspective, an incrementalist is like a doctor trying to cure cancer one cell at a time, right? It's literally a battle you can't win, right? Because the moment you achieve a small victory, the system finds a new way to grow elsewhere, right? Or grow around you, right? This argument here, right, is rooted in what's called the iron law of oligarchy, right? I know some of y'all have never heard of that, so we'll kind of go through that just briefly, right? The iron law of oligarchy, right, is a political science theory, right, that was created by Robert Michel's, right? Michel's central thesis, okay, is that all complex organizations, no matter how democratic their founding, will inevitably devolve into a self-perpetuating oligarchy, right? This happens because as an organization grows, it requires specialized leadership and a professional bureaucracy, right? We know what we're talking about here, right? Now, y'all hear me loud and clear, right? Because you're probably sitting in your seat right now. Damn, he just called out the U.S. government. Yes, 100%, according to the iron law of oligarchy, right? Because it is an organization, right? The government is an organization on its face that grows, that needs specialized leadership and a bureaucracy, right? See, these leaders who control the organization's resources and information inevitably becomes from a separate class whose primary goal is to maintain and expand their own power. Let's think about this a minute, right? We have the two-party system, right? That will pick the people they want for you to vote for based on the amount of money they have gotten from corporations to push an agenda, right? Right. The government under the two-party system, right? The two-party system puts their candidates in to expand government in favor of the corporations, right? They expand their own power via regulations and statutes they shouldn't be doing, right? Even through the Constitution of the United States, through time, they have done that. I did an exercise last night and I asked folks, how many amendments to the United States Constitution gave the government more power? aka the clause saying Congress can pass laws, et cetera, right? Under this amendment, right? Expand the expansion of power, right? Because it doesn't serve the people, right? Right? It doesn't serve the people, right? The parties don't serve the people they were originally meant to represent, right? On the other hand, right, the state, as the largest and most complex organization in existence, is the ultimate example of the iron law of oligarchy in motion. Elected officials and bureaucrats, no matter how well intentioned, become part of the ruling elite whose interests are no longer aligned with the public. We see this all the time, right? Very few of the politicians will step out of line, but the majority of them, you can bet your bottom dollar, right? You bet your bottom dollar that they're no longer aligned with the people, but they give you the illusion they're aligned with you by speaking, right? By speaking the Hegelian dialect to you to get on board. Or as I had a discussion earlier today, right, about rhetoric, right, and the three different types of rhetoric, right? We've had that. We had a discussion earlier, right, and we discussed, the rhetoric of emotion, right, and the rhetoric of using factual information, right. Pathos and logos is what it's called. Those two different types of rhetoric, right? They will use that to appease the you that they're the man for the job. I'm gonna keep doing the job for you. Meanwhile, they're going to their state capitals. They're going to Washington D.C. and have forgotten about you because the corporations is making their pockets daddy fat sacks, right? See, this is the intellectual foundation of the revolutionaries' critique of incrementalism. See, they say, right, you can't reform an institution whose very nature is to resist reform and expand its own power, aka United States government, right? This is the very core of what's called the dissident economy, where people build and participate in alternative systems. And we've seen that, right? Remember when the government decided to get itself involved and expand itself into the private banking space, aka PayPal, aka Stripe, aka whatever Zelle, all of them, right? Remember, they said, oh, we need to, we passed a law, right? Remember, they passed a law if you had a transaction more than $500, it's to be reported, right? Remember that? I know y'all remember that, right? This is what I'm talking about. And then we got other systems like parallel economy that Dan Bongino and his people started, right? To get away from that mainstream. Sounds like a great minarchist idea, doesn't it? Hmm? Now, in the first case study, right? I want to go through the information revolution part of this, right? Because the greatest example, the greatest modern example of a nonviolent revolution is the information revolution. And we're living through it literally minute by minute, right? Obviously brought to you by the internet, right? For centuries, right? Let's keep in mind, for centuries, the state had a powerful grip on the flow of information, had to be printed, broadcasted, or licensed by an authority. The state controlled the gatekeepers, and the mere threat of losing a broadcast license had a chilling effect on speech, right? Right. And we're talking about things like the fairness doctrine, things of that nature, right? then the internet popped up. Internet popped up. The state no longer had control because they did not understand how to get control, right, of the fifth estate. As you know, guys that listen on Mondays, that's now the fifth estate, right, where you get the information from alternative media, right? The government couldn't figure out a way to control the fifth estate. So what did they do, right? They amended the Communications Act, Section 230, right, which is the big controversy, right? They amended Section 230 to put their dirty ass paws into the internet and what's posted on the internet, right? Because remember, right, Joe Biden used this authority to say, oh, Hunter Biden laptop wasn't real. It's Russian misinformation. And then the government did their best to send out. There's 51 intelligence agents that said this Hunter Biden laptop is not real, to try to get people to shut up about it. Because if you didn't shut up about Biden, the government told the fifth estate to shut it down, right? That damn Section 230, man, I tell you, needs to be repealed, right? I mean, down to the point where they shut individuals like me that just do this thing across the airwaves, across the internet, because I said COVID-19. I said jibby jab, right? Let's shut the whole thing because you can't say that. It's government, right? I want you to think about this. An individual can broadcast their ideas to millions of people without asking permission from a newspaper editor, TV network, or government agency. The state's power, okay, to control the narrative was and is fundamentally diminished, right? Now, I want you to go back. I want you to think about Arab Spring a second, right? Where the dissidents of Arab Spring used Twitter and Facebook to organize in ways that were impossible in a world of state-controlled media, right? But in the world of independent media, podcasts, blogs, and citizen journalism, they've rendered the old gatekeepers of media and information, many of them that were tied to state interests, increasingly irrelevant, right? This in itself was not an incremental change. It was a seismic shift, right? And ultimately, fundamentally altered the flow of power, right? But what did the government try to do? Oh, you again, as I mentioned, if you say this, you're off, right? We're going to create a disinformation board, right? We're going to create a misinformation board just because we don't like what you're saying. You're putting out, right? Remember, they come up with the three words: misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, right? And they kept telling you in a few instances you're putting out malinformation. What does malinformation mean? It means the information is valid, but it is damaging. And they try to censor malinformation, right? Any kind of information they could not control or didn't know the source, they called it malinformation. That's my point, right? While the internet dismantled the state's monopoly on information, it also created a new private concentration of power, okay? The tech monopolies like Google, Meta, X, now serve as the new gatekeepers. And the fight for liberty has shifted from battling state censors to confronting digital censorship, where private companies, often under political pressure, can deplatform and silence individuals in ways the state cannot do under constitutional protections. You won't get this money if you don't censor that person, right? The companies, right? And watch this. The political parties can participate in this, right? The political parties are holding these digital gatekeepers hostage by funding. So if the Republican Party says, I'm going to give y'all $200 million, you need to censor anything related to Trump. On the other side, the Democrats give social media company, hey, we give you $300 million, right, to keep allowing people posting bad things about Trump, but also posting pro-Democrat. This is the problem we have. Because remember, our political parties are private organizations, right? They are companies per se, right? But with all this, it adds a critical layer, right, of complexity to the minarchist argument, right? Because it's showing that the fight for liberty is always a constant struggle under new forms of power, both public and private. Okay. In the next case study I have, right, under the parallel institutions revolution, right? Because this path intrigued me as I looked into it, right? Because it's another path to build the parallel institutions, like AKA like Don Bongino created the parallel economy, right, thing, right? And to create like voluntary alternatives to government services, right? Also in this, right? To make the state's offerings unnecessary, right? Again, this is not about lobbying to change a program. It's about building a better solution and inviting people to join you, right? The perfect example is this is the rise of health sharing ministries, right? Right? These health sharing ministries are voluntary organizations, okay? Often majority of them are faith-based, right? Where members agree to pay a small monthly fee and sharing each other's medical costs, right? And in this model, in some cases, right, this dates back probably early 1980s, right? Long before the ACA, serving as I would say, a quiet revolution in the healthcare market, right? Because the founding of these healthcare ministries, like Christian healthcare ministries back in 81 and Medishare in 93, was a direct response to rising healthcare costs and a desire for a more affordable faith-based alternative to traditional insurance, right? And for decades, these ministries operated in relative obscurity, okay? Growing slowly but steadily. But it was the passage of the ACA with this individual mandate that suddenly pushed them into the national spotlight as a federally recognized alternative, catalyzing a period of explosive growth, right? It's a completely private, right? These healthcare ministries, nonprofit alternative to government subsidized healthcare like Medicare, Medicaid, and to traditional, excuse me, private insurance. Now, membership into these groups, keep in mind, right, has exploded in many years because they are often more affordable, more transparent, and more in line with the values of their members. Okay. Now, the same logic, right, applies to private dispute resolution services, right, that bypass the government courts or private security firms that offer alternatives to police. See, for example, here in Florida, right, we see a rapid growth in gated communities and private developments where residents voluntarily pay for private security, road maintenance, and even waste removal, right? Effectively opting out of some of the local government services. Is this what I'm talking about? This is not anything new, right? HOA. If you live in an HOA, you can actually create your own police force to patrol your neighborhood if you wanted to, if you could get the funding up to fund it, right? But in most cases, if you are going that far, you might as well charter yourself. Now, the practicality, right, and the risk of these institutions, right, while while they do work for specific demographics, they do lack a universal safety net of state-run programs, right? A person with like for example, an expensive pre-existing condition, right, may not be accepted, and there's no legal recourse if a sharing community fails. There's only the risk that as these institutions grow, they will inevitably attract the attention of the state, which may seek to regulate or even co-opt them, right? The revolutionaries' ultimate goal is a tipping point. Right? They want to get it right there, right? Right there. And when the parallel system becomes so vast that the old one becomes costly, hollow shell, that's what they want, right? In my next to last case study, right, I want to bring up something called the Free State Project. Okay. Right. In our last episode, we talked about how my home state of Florida, right? And look at the radical real world example of a revolutionary idea applied to a state, right? We're going to shift to New Hampshire with the Free State Project in New Hampshire, right? Now, after looking into the Free State Project, I knew about it, but I hadn't like really looked into it, right? But the concept is really simple and brilliant, okay? And it's really revolutionary, right? Now, the founders of the Free State Project in 2001 recognized that it's nearly impossible to fight the state at the national level. So they decided to change the battlefield, right? The Free State Project is a coordinated migration of liberty minded individuals to a single state. Obviously, I mentioned it, New Hampshire, right? With the goal of concentrating their numbers to achieve political dominance. They aim to make New Hampshire a bastion of liberty where government is minimal and individual freedom is paramount. Okay. Now, this Free State Project, is not merely a political party, it's a social and political migration. Okay. Participants choose New Hampshire out of a list of low population states with the live free or die motto, right? Their strategy, right, per their website, it's really simple. Amass a critical mass of liberty advocates to make a measurable political impact on a state with a small population and a highly accessible 400 member legislature, right? This is the ultimate expression of building a new system from within. Now, despite a small fraction of the population, the Free State Project participants have had a significant verifiable impact. Right? They have successfully run for and won dozens of seats in the New Hampshire legislature, often as Republicans. They have championed and helped pass landmark legislation, including constitutional carry, which we discussed in the last episode, right, as an incrementalist victory, and the complete repeal of many outdated knife laws. They have also successfully advocated for school choice programs and resisted efforts to raise taxes and increase occupational licensing requirements. Now, though this is not a perfect solution, okay, here's an example that even a free state, the citizens are still subject to federal laws, which is a major constraint, okay? Furthermore, such a project is a massive multi-decade undertaking fraught with internal conflicts and practical difficulties, right? It faces challenges in coordinating thousands of people, dealing with political promises, and overcoming the public perception of being a fringe movement, right? It is a powerful, powerful idea, but it requires an immense sustained effort that is not immune to the realities of political and social inertia. Y'all should look into that when you get a chance. The Free State Project in New Hampshire. You'll be amazed at the work they're doing and how they're doing it. And they're kind of setting up the path to minarchy that I mentioned. They kind of on the same couple of things I don't agree with, but obviously, right, I'm not there in it. But here we are, right? Now we're coming up on the tail end of this here. So remember, guys, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Share it, do the things. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. The last piece I have here, this last segment here, I call it a revolutionary's challenge, a leap of faith in the road ahead, right? Now, the revolutionary path, right, in my opinion, that I've laid out, right, is not without its own profound challenges, unlike incrementalism, right? It's a leap of faith. There's no guarantee of success, right? And while the promise of a total paradigm shift is alluring, it is also unpredictable because we know it can slide the other way, right? So, what happens, right, if a new system fails to gain traction? What if the state responds with force to protect its monopoly, right? Keep in mind, the revolutionary path is high risk, high reward, right? And it requires a great deal of courage and willingness to face the unknown. As in contrast to the incrementalist, at least they can claim a small tangible victories along the way. The revolutionary has no such comfort. You're either all in or all out, right? There's only hope. Their only hope is a complete change, right? And total transformation. Okay. Now here's the nuance, right? I'm gonna give you some nuance on this too, right? And it just hit me right across my head, right? The moral hazard, okay, of the revolutionary choice, right? Because remember, by opting out, a revolutionary is sometimes seen as irresponsible or selfish for abandoning a system that many people depend on, right? They are choosing a difficult, more that person will be choosing a more difficult and personal path rather than a collective, albeit flawed one, right? This creates what I call what I would call a social prisoner's dilemma, right? It's an individual's best interest to opt out or to stay and fight to improve the system for all. And that's what revolutionaries fall into. And that's why a lot of revolutions fail, because it's like, oh, this is getting too much, or they're afraid for their life or whatever. And they're like, no, I'm out. I got to protect me and mine, right? Revolutionaries, right? They have to confront the existential risk of their own success. Because what if a revolution of ideas leads to a power vacuum that is filled by something far more oppressive than the old state, right? And this is what I say when people say, oh, I want to rewrite the Constitution. These revolutionaries want to rewrite the Constitution. Absolutely not. Because if you, it can, and actually, let's don't say it will cause a power vacuum, right? It's going to cause a power vacuum, and you don't know what that's going to be, right? The path of the revolutionary is a gamble that the world without the state will be better, but there's no guarantee it will not be worse. It's a gamble, right? That requires profound faith in the individual. So, which path is the right one? The incrementalist path with its slow and steady march, or the revolutionary path that is bold and paradigm shifting? It's the central tension in our journey to minarchy, right? The truth may be that it's not a choice between one or the other, but a matter of understanding how these two forces can work in tandem. Okay, because incremental victories can lay the groundwork for a broader, more revolutionary change in public opinion. And the revolutionary idea can give incrementalists a clear and compelling direction to work towards. Next week on episode 4, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper into one of the most powerful forces that facilitates both of these paths. And I've called it the technologist path. We'll explore how decentralized technology, from crypto to 3D printing, is building the tools for liberty. With that, I want to thank y'all for tuning in this evening. Listen to me do my thing here. Make sure y'all share this, all that good stuff. Do the things right. Until then, do me a favor. Keep thinking about the road ahead. Right? Keep thinking about where well, I'm gonna say keep thinking about what's more important to you, right? When it comes to liberty. Okay. What's more important? I need y'all to keep chasing after that, after life and liberty, especially in light of what has happened, right? And I want to take a quick minute TV timeout here a second. All right, we're not going to hash over anything we talked about on Friday on Southern Liberty, but what I am going to say is, at this point in time, we need to start really acting like minarchists when it comes to the social aspect of our society, right? Because the government has allowed evil to foment amongst our society, aka via our politicians spewing bullshit rhetoric and literally indoctrinating people from the daises of Congress. They get on these TV shows and just pontificate, right? Speaking just pure dogma, right? We know the government is sending their agents of the state out to harass people. This is why we need to act like minarchists and treat those peoples as agents, confused agents of the state. And we need to let them know, as collectively, we will not allow this evil to continue. The government's going to stop it. We're going to stop you, though. We're gonna. And again, I'm not a fan of cancel culture, but here we are, right? I am the person to cancel you. If you keep pontificating evil, I will cancel you. I will make sure every time I see you, your life is a living hell because of the evil that you hold towards your fellow man. I will make sure you know it until one, you run away from me and be evil somewhere else. And even then, you can't run from me. Social media is a bitch. Once you completely leave the internet, you can't get away from me. And I will make sure you know how evil you are, because there's no room for evil in a civil society. Then once we remove you suckers, then we focus on the government. We focus on the government and we get those evil bastards out of there too, via the political parties. We take control of the political parties and we dismantle them. Both Democrat and Republican, just dismantle them both. We talked about the revolutionary part. That in itself is revolutionary. But how many people are willing to do it? Look, people, love your neighbors, love your family, but ultimately, if you don't love yourself, you can't love anybody else. Peace and love, everybody. See you on Monday.